Welcome to the 18th Salon of the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series hosted by Genevieve, Vaughan, and the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. I'm your moderator today, Letitia Layson. We are so pleased to have two women from our network with us today. If you see, Kaarina is having a little difficulty with her camera feed, but we can hear her perfectly. She has a thunderstorm that just came up, but she's with us. She's calling in from Finland, and we have Barbara Mann, who's calling in from, I think, Ohio. Our guests will speak, followed by a Q&A. So let's begin. Our first speaker is Kaarina. She's going to be talking to us about appropriating the bear rituals of rebirth, maternal gifting versus the exchange of women. Kaarina got her PhD from the University of Toronto, has held numerous women's studies positions. Her numerous publications include Finnish Goddess Mythology, The Golden Woman, and Traditional Ecological Knowledge, from climate change to Indigenous Earth democracy and the gift, mothering, gift, and revolution, in honor of Genevieve's Vaughan's life's work and several forthcoming books. One is The Woman Who Married the Bear, Bear Spirituality of Ancient Foremothers with Barbara Mann, and The Sauna and Sweat Lodge as Rites of Rebirth, and Bear, B-A-R-E, and B-E-A-R, Being. Welcome, Kaarina. Kaarina, can we just have you, I'm so sorry that your connection, oh, that is so much better. Okay, so Kaarina, please, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good.
Yes, thank you, Jen and Diane and Letitia, for making that was two dogs just dropping the lamp here. Thank you for organizing this and keeping us away from saloons. Salons are much better during this Corona time. I'm actually also now giving myself a birthday present. I'm officially over the hill as I'm turning 70 this month. And my best gift is now that several of my books are going to come out. And I have a publisher for the Finnish version of the topic that I will now be talking about. I'm sorry about this horrible quality, but it could be the thunderstorm that we had here that is creating this.
Let me just say, Kaarina, for a minute, we'll actually have Kaarina's presentation up so that you have it. Oh, and it looks so good right now.
Okay, I managed to pull it up. So the purpose of my presentation is to give some idea of the books that I have now been getting ready for publishers. And the topic is the same topic as in 2008 when I did an anthology on women and bears, but I have gone much more deeply into the whole notion of bear and mother spirituality in the Paleolithic times. And now I try to focus more on the Finno-Ugric goddesses and rituals because they are the most neglected aspect of this topic. And I'm very grateful to Jen and to the gift economy, to modern matriarchal studies, and to archaeomythology, because that is where I have been able to find new methods and new approaches, allowing me to make more out of the material that I've been looking at for maybe 20 years. So caves, bears' dens, sweat houses, saunas, wombs as sites of and shrines of rebirth feature centrally in this research. And I have recently found also sweat houses in Ireland from the past with St. Bridget leading you inside the sweat house, and I was quite excited about that because it shows that the sweat system of sweat house has been really important for women, not just among Native people in North America, but also in Europe. So in this paper, I want to focus on what I call the Carnival King project. It's a European Union funded project of information on current rituals practiced in different European countries. And I thank Christiana Harle for pointing this out to me, because studying this ritual matrix shows so clearly how the gift schema, as Genevieve calls it, has been replaced by exchange and the values that go with exchange economy. I refer also to the non-patriarchal spring festivals that we can reconstruct on the basis of, for instance, St. Bridget's research. Mary Condren has also been very helpful in pointing out to me many articles, most of them by her, on the reconstructed rituals, which show a clearly different set of values and that clearly fit the gift economy. And also they all carry traces of the archaic bear religion and the worship of the great goddess. The patriarchal winter festivals have taken their place, but express the exchange logic, and I will discuss in what ways this takes place. To summarize it is that the all-male or almost all-male carnivals now appropriate women's roles as birth givers, and their goal is to tame the bear for their hunting needs. The ethos is very different. So I agree with Genevieve that we need generalized mothering to get out of the disasters caused by capitalist patriarchy. Barbara Tedlock, in her book, Woman in a Shaman's Body, notes that even language was said to have evolved out of the need for verbal communication by groups of prehistoric men traveling together in search of prey. I'm sure that Genevieve would disagree with that. And she has shown convincingly that language evolves from mother-child interaction and not the hunting men. We also need to reconstruct women's ways of knowing and practicing spiritual beliefs and rituals. And it's quite clear that the gift schema applies to them. So as women, I think we did our rituals, our own rituals, not just rooms of our own. Genevieve's writings on the gift schema are very, very useful. And I think that we do need a new cosmology and paradigm to get out of the mess that capitalist patriarchy has created. To quote Jen, the many oppressions that permeate our world can be understood in terms of the oppression of gift giving by exchange. So it's not just a matter of gendered oppression. There is an ancient and ongoing struggle between the gift economy, mostly women and indigenous cultures, and the exchange economy, the imperial colonizing West, patriarchal capitalism, which until now, the exchange economy has won. Exchange is a distortion of gifting, transmits the commodity without gifting. It separates the gift aspect of the object from the transaction, while satisfying the need of the buyer in a new moment as a use value devoid of gifts. While this may sound that we're dealing with economic theory, of course, this can be applied to everything. And I think that it's time to apply the gift paradigm to rituals as well, because they are very important in transmitting the values by which we live. So continue with Vaughan's theories. Nurturing provides the first communication and the first model of communication. And a key notion there, of course, is that value is conferred upon the receiver in this transmission. Exchange, in contrast, is a distortion of gift-giving communication. And again, to give an example from my research, in the St. Bridget's festival, nature is used to heal, whereas in the Carnival King festivals, the approach to nature is very different. It's all about dominating and taming nature.
Kaarina, can I
Yes.
just interrupt for a second? Would you be willing to turn off your camera? It's, I think there's a problem with your camera. We can hear you perfectly, but there's a little bit of distraction. There's lots of interference with your camera.
How do I get to that?
At the bottom of your screen where you show the screen share on the left, you'll see camera.
I don't see it now.
Okay, then
Wait.
why don't you, do you see it?
Yeah, now I see it. Okay.
Perfect.
So now it's
Thank you
better.
so much. Yes.
Okay, fine. So the research team in this European project, they are an award-winning ethnographic kaleidoscope featuring over 50 different masquerades of some 13 European countries. And the hypothesis underlying this research and exhibition is that the winter masquerades of European peoples, that is the carnival proper, plus many other entwined rituals that take place in Europe from Halloween down to the beginning of spring, draw their inspiration from a common ceremonial imagery, but are structured in very, very similar way. They reveal the structure of the same ancient liturgy of the same very sacred drama. Now, I beg to differ here because they reflect historical appropriations of the bear goddess spirituality of the Paleolithic era through more recent times, culminating in more pure patriarchy. They mark a shift from celebration to celebration of fertility, light, and rebirth to domination over nature and women, including a great deal of religious violence. The exclusionary Eucharist and the notion that women are impure, whereas in St. Bridget's festival, purification had a very different function and was empowering to women. In these festivals, carnivals, all actors almost everywhere are male only, or trans men, and women and animals are at best currency of exchange between the men and the trans men. And there is maternal symbolism only as appropriated second culture. No value is conferred upon maternal thinking by women. At worst, nature is commercialized for tourism, although this hasn't taken place everywhere. So to contrast these two different hypothetical schemas shows a difference between a woman-positive, life-oriented past and the exchange logic where the Heroes Gamos, for instance, becomes a mock wedding featuring only men dressed up as the married couple. Here is a picture from the Finno-Ugric connection celebrating the ritual marriage of woman and the bear, a totemistic couple, our forebears, representing interspecies alignment, twin cosmos, bonding, bridging nature culture, and then the whole notion of splitting us from nature and culture and serving the goals of humanizing the beastly. So here in these pictures, you can see the mock wedding. And women too have been assimilated into patriarchy, and on the internet you see lots and lots of pictures of bear goddesses and bear gods, but in a way that I don't find very spiritual. Here's an example of the appropriation of the goddess culture. The shamans and queens' traditional high hats and outfits feature in many of the carnivals where the men are dressed up wearing these flowered cones on their heads and dressing up as women. On the right side, you see a Scythian discovery, a reconstruction of a woman found in Altai, the Ice Maiden, whose hat is the tree of life with a deer goddess, whereas for the men, according to the stories that I read, the hats signify fertility and the phallus. So here is the summary of the key points that I'm dealing with in one of these books. So in the patriarchal context, the key players of the rituals are male mummers, male ministers with the high hats, and a hero who is the bear son. There's lots of these bear son stories. Whereas in the key players in St. Bridget's Festival, of course, are St. Bridget, the former pagan bear goddess. And the further back we go, it would be the Great Mother and the bear. The resurrection of the killed bear is a key thing in the dramas played out in Europe now, whereas rebirth of nature and of bear and the menstrual rituals of the women were in the center. Mary Conrad has also done wonderful work in showing how fertility as a notion has changed from involving very peaceful rituals of pouring milk on the land or women menstruating or something like that. Fertility was a generalized mothering process, fructifying the land and feeding everyone. But with patriarchy, it becomes bloodshed and violence and sacrificing of the sons and even of oneself in the name of elite conquest. So death and violence become the key focus of these festivals also, even though they have the mock wedding and things like that. But mostly the rituals have become more exclusive. And already in the 19th century, in the bear ceremonial, the ritual feast was very exclusive. It was almost like Eucharist excluding women, or at least considering women as polluting presence. So we have come a long way from the rituals involving all community. And now I'm probably coming to the end because I think we've lost a lot of time now with these problems here of the thunderstorm. I think that the reason why it's important for us to take back the night of female spirituality, the cave, the darkness, the meditative space of the cave and the sauna and the sweat lodge and the animal worship, is because the problems that we're having in the world today have to do specifically with the mockery and denigration of the feminine. I dare bring up this issue also of cisgender, referring to women as cisgender, and the anger that some aggressive trans men have directed at issues like women's festivals, women's history, menses, and so on. The reason why I refer to this is because in a book that Barbara Mann gave me by Adrian Mayer on Amazons in Scythia, the female shamans' outfits were appropriated by trans men, and subsequently the women shamans were pushed out and outlawed. So while I believe that the trans rights are an absolute must and I fully embrace them, I think that women's rights beyond these claims of essentialism are also a right. So it's not an either or, but both and. And I lament the fact that whenever a subjugated group tries to use gender as a means of consolidating its status, culture, history, identity, the way that men have always done, even women invoke essentialism and thus trying to block even the strategic use of gender. So I think that it is very important to take back the night and the gift schema and to work on Homo donans versus Homo economicus, because this Carnival King project claims that the Homo economicus kind of hero is the shared pan-European identity, which obviously does not even try to refer to women. So here, I just wanted to show you that I have found much interesting evidence on the shrines, the most distant spiritual spaces being feminine. This is Saint Bridget carved onto a shrine at the entrance to a sauna. And the traces of the bear woman are even in Finland in official statues. So the bear woman is there as the one that gave the instructions, the original instructions to the woman, but that's about all we have left of this past. And a final teaser to all of you, I have also found this absolutely fascinating manuscript called the Voynich manuscript from the 15th century, somewhere in Europe, which features, the whole book is about women only rituals, naked women with crowns on their heads, enjoying themselves in a spa. And anyone who would want to engage in this, in understanding what this is all about, this is a real teaser for us and shows that these women's rituals are there, but we need to recover them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaarina. I love the fact that you brought up the twinned cosmos, because our next speaker, Barbara Mann, is going to be talking about two spirits, fractals in the twin cosmos. And Barbara Mann is a scholar and professor in the Honors College of the University of Toledo in Toledo, Ohio, in the USA. She's authored 15 books, the latest of which is The President by Massacre, Indian Killing for Political Gain, which came out in 2019. The one that I particularly love the title of is Spirits of Blood, Spirits of Breath, the Twin Cosmos of Indigenous America in 2016. For the full bios of each of these women, I want to refer you to our website so that you can take a look at that, and we can give the time to Barbara, and then at the end to Barbara and Kaarina to take whatever questions that you have. And it is, yes, I see the comment about the misuse of the trans men and trans women. Oftentimes when English is not the first language, the gender identifications are often confused in the language, because in many languages there's only one pronoun. So translating back and forth is also confusing. So Barbara, with that, I look forward to your presentation. And Kaarina, thank you so much.
Now, are you hearing me now, Letitia?
Yes,
okay,
we're
sorry
good.
about that. I said thank you to Kaarina for the presentation. I'm sorry we couldn't see her. Hopefully, she and I are gaining a contract with Oxford on the bear material. I really look forward to it. My presentation is Two Spirits, Fractals of the Twinned Cosmos. And the two spirits indigenously are not at all the way they've been appropriated, I would say misappropriated, especially in the United States. I want to clarify what's going on here. Oh, come on, move forward. I can't get this to move. There we go. All right. Many of you may not know what a fractal is or have only a vague idea. There are three different basic conceptions in nature, in geometry, and in algebra. And the little display on the right hand of my screen is covering up the algebra display. But what you can see in, for example, a leaf is a repeating pattern, and it doesn't end because each little petal in each leaf is the leaf itself. So you've got the same pattern repeating, but looking different each time it repeats. So unless you're looking closely, you can't really see what it is. Mathematicians have worked this out. They know the different kinds of ways to express it mathematically, but artistically, you can also see that it is an expression of reality. Geometry you can see pretty plainly with the isosceles triangle turned right side up, upside down, and portrayed in various ways within the boundaries of another isosceles triangle. That is a set of fractals, the same pattern repeating, but in irregular, very frequently in nature, irregular ways that are not instantly identifiable unless you're paying attention. There, good. I'm glad it moved again. So what we're talking about with the twin cosmos are dual fractals, mirrored dual different fractals. And what I did is I found a fractal design here, and I've labeled the one on the left the fractal of blood, and the one on the right, the fractal of breath. So blood refers to planet Earth, anything on planet Earth. Breath refers not to the sky specifically, but to outer space. I'm talking indigenous America here. So it's outer space. And you'll see the little Milky Way-like thing there. The name has got a very special function I'll go into later. But by and large, blood is represented by earth, by water, and that refers to amniotic fluid because it's female. Blood is associated with women, and it's the blood of procreation, not the blood of death and destruction. What do women make from blood? They make new life. What do men make from blood? They make death. So women are the proper province of blood, and that is planet Earth. It's also a youth thing because Earth was created after the cosmos at large. So it's younger than outer space. Breath is air and sky are the basic references to it, even though technically, scientifically, air is part of Earth. When you're talking spirituality and mythology, science doesn't necessarily enter in, so I don't want anybody to get hung up on that. Air is associated with the male. It has to do with expelled air. That's why male shamans tend to blow and breathe on things, and they do chants. That's a male kind of thing. Female shamans will work with stones, which are earth, sometimes rattles, very often with water and stones and water. Those are the appropriate things that work with female hands as opposed to male hands. Male and female are not the primary expression of the fractal. They are just one of 1,000 different sets of expression. Stones express earth, right? Birds express sky. Stars express sky. And oh yeah, men and women are kind of in there too. It's not the basic concept of anything. They exist in a binary, but it's a binary of complements. This is not a Western definition of reality. And if you look hard at the, I don't know if you can see it because the panel of projection here on the right is obscuring some of it.
We can see the whole slide, Barbara. We can see the whole slide.
Okay, the red part is actually a mirror of the blue part, but you don't see it as well unless you really look at it. It's a fractal. It's not obvious. They're complements, but they're more the same than different. The binary of indigenous America are a twinship. They complete one another. They are collaborators. They are friends. They are joined together in making something. They are not opposing competition. And the Western notion of binaries, that they must be deadly enemies, comes straight out of monotheism. And I think it's very damaging that European monotheism is slapped all over everything and used as the lens for interpreting everything. It's not, it should not be, and certainly should never be applied to indigenous thought. that comes out of the one God, the one life kind of thinking, where if there's two of anything, one must be an imposter to be driven out. It must be evil. It must be the devil. Ooh, ooh, ooh. In Indigenous America, the two are partners. They're friends. They help one another. It's a totally different idea, and it's expressed continent-wide. I mean, continental system, North, Central, South America wide, through a very stylized iconography that's pretty persistent. So I've got here North America's sacred twinship, some expressions in the mounds, and there are a lot of different mounds. One of the most common expressions is the serpent and the eagle. And when they were first created, these mounds had complements. So the rock eagle there in Georgia, which was part of the cover of my Spirits Blood, Spirits Breath book, a different shot of it. It's in Eatonville, Georgia. It's the eagle. He's made out of rock. That completes the cosmos, because rock is earth. Eagle is sky. And by the way, he's not just some little eagle flying around. He is the cloudland, what we call a cloudland eagle, the thunderbird. He's an expression of a very large thing. The Thunderbird has a wingspan of like 40 to even 100 feet. He's very huge. He comes from Skyworld, which is an outer space thing. So he flies high, he sees far. So he's about spatiality. The great horned serpent, whom you see on the left here, is an expression of Earth. It's male because there's female in breath and there's male in blood. It's not an exclusionary thing. So the great horned serpent is male. He loves women. He loves women. You see he's running out of his coils on the left. You can see he's running out of his coils. So he's traveling. And everything that exists has a medicine bundle. Everything. You do, whether or not you know it, you got one. When you travel, if you're aware enough to make a medicine bundle, you carry it with you because it's part of your spirit that you're taking with you. This gives you a problem if you happen to be a servant, because how do you carry your medicine bundle? Well, the great horned serpent extrudes his horns when he travels, and he slings his medicine bundle between them. So that's not an egg in his mouth, as archaeologists keep insisting. It's not got anything to do with eggs. It's his medicine bundle and his Ullansudi stone, which is a little burial mound there in the center, is a part of his mystical bundle. Is hanging from his horns as he travels. That's, by the way, an observatory. So that's his connection with sky. Depending on where you stand on his coils, and depending how you sight through the bundle, through the horns, or through any of the humps, you're going to get a different view of the night sky for different reasons. Typically, planting, if you're a farmer, you kind of need to know when to plant, when to harvest, when the seasons are, and when they're coming. And so this was created by the Moon-Eyed people, who were not Cherokee. They predated the Cherokee. I don't care what the internet tells you. There's a lot more I could say about this. We need to move on. Let's go to Central America, where you see Quetzalcoatl. Again, great serpent. He's not extruding his horns here. Instead, he's wearing feathers. He's the completed cosmos. He's the completed twinship. Why a serpent with feathers? That's why, because feathers are breath and serpents are blood. So that's a Central American expression of the idea. Get down to South America, you got some really neat things. I pulled up some Nazca lines, which are pretty ancient, a lot of them. On the top right, you see an eagle, cloudland eagle, and notice he's got a serpent design in his wings. That's about as complete as you can get. Some other expressions of Earth, I like the whale. People on coastal areas will use whales instead of serpents a lot. And so you see a whale here, he's got a fish in his mouth. Very interesting. And the little guy in his tail, I don't know what that's about because I'm not Nazca. And then on the bottom right, you see a serpent who is apparently about to dine on a human man. The horned serpent does not care much for men. He gives them terrible headaches and they need to stay out of his way or he might just eat them. South America, you get some very large cats. And here you got Nazca lines on the right. You've got a Yanomami artist, modern day, creating these great, I think they're margays over a star. His breath. And look at him, he's on a hill in the Nazca line. Hills are breath, mountains are breath. And you look at him, you can see the spots on his body and the rings on his tail. That's a margay. That's a margay. Looks a bit like a leopard, but it's Central and South American. These etchings are a couple thousand years ago old, and they're just discovering new ones, new Nazcas that you've never seen before, and this is one of them. He's breath. Okay, you'll see this breath and blood expressed throughout all the cultures. I'm just using the Iroquois and clan moieties here. That's the clan halves. Clans have halves, and there are a lot of reasons for that I won't go into, but you've got turtle, which is blood, and wolf half, which is breath. So you got the two halves. And then you got the clans within those halves. And so clearly you've got a blood breath complement going on there. It also happens in the national halves. Women, grandmothers specifically, run the clans. National halves, grandfathers run them. By the way, the men cannot consider an issue that the grandmothers have not first sent to them. It's matriarchal. Women have the edge. So the national halves are breath-based. And remember, breath is older than blood. So the wolf would be considered older than turtle. It's a ceremonial thing rather than a scientific, biological kind of thing. Youngers are blood, elders are breath in the national halves. So you've got in the center, this is the Hiawatha belt of the Iroquois League. In the center is a white pine tree of peace. That's the Onondaga, an elder clan, an elder nation, I'm sorry. On the right, you got the Mohawk. On the left, you got the Seneca, bigger rectangles there because they're elders. Okay. You have the younger of the Seneca, which are the Cayuga, the younger of the Mohawk, which are the Oneida. They're blood, they're younger. They do the adopting in because you're making new citizens. You can either make them by giving birth to them or make them by adopting them, that is, granting citizenship. The women alone do that because the women alone give birth. Here we got a drawing from 1591 of women dancing. They will be dancing in a counterclockwise circle because that's the spin of the solar system is in a counterclockwise direction. Women always enter the circle in a counterclockwise direction if they're being traditional. An awful lot of modern powwows, the women start doing it like the man, entering the right. I was at one a few years ago when Grandma Crandall was still alive. And she saw the powwow women from out west starting to enter from the right. She got mad about it and organized all the Eastern women who were there to usurp the entry and go to the left, which was proper. Feet never leaving the ground. That's an important woman thing too. So the women, he's got their feet off the ground. That's actually not quite so. That's a European idea. But the women are going around in a circle. And notice that even though they're from the two clan halves, and traditionally you would have every other one would be the other clan half, the woman's footsteps are those of the woman before and those of the woman after her. That's a collaboration. There's nothing individual going on here. This is, by the way, the Timucuans who are in Florida. Iconography of the mounds is really interesting. Again, the twin cosmos. You always find these icons together. So you got the square of earth and the circle of sky. So the circle is connected to the square of earth by what archaeologists call a causeway. That's the name. The name is the spirit of each life, your personality. My mother called it the personality of this life, which lasts about 10 years after death before it's fully dissipated. It's a temporary, ephemeral kind of spirit. Blood and breath are permanent. The name is temporary. So that causeway connects the two. It's the job of the name in each life to coordinate blood and breath so that they're always together and working in tandem. So you've got the square and circle, very common iconography. Then you've got the two on the right, which the first one is a top-down shot of the sky around the water, and right dead center is the back of turtle rising out of the water. So that's the blood in the center, breath around in the name. They're connecting the two. Or you can do it in profile. You got arc of sky over the back of turtle rising out of the water, and the name between the two. In this particular Seal Township design, interestingly, you've got the square of earth inside the circle of sky. Very, very interesting. Makes total sense to an indigenous person. I won't go into what the other icons mean there. Here I've always found this very interesting, although nobody will listen to me. Portsmouth group is in Kentucky across the Ohio River from Portsmouth, Ohio. So they call it the Portsmouth group. You got the very dead center is back of turtle, which is a burial mound, surrounded by these different circles of mounds. The Lenape say that those are the dimensions. Those are the various dimensions of reality. I find it very interesting that this map of Tenochtitlan from 1524 by Hernan Cortes is the same iconography. And notice that it's actually the square of earth in the center. How interesting is that? And then you got the causeways, and they go mostly the four directions. Over here on the right, they kind of lost a little, but it's still directional. This was the city before it was totally destroyed by Cortes. By the way, it's a created island. It did not exist in the Lake of the Moon till the Aztecs built it. So the Chinese are not the first people to build islands. You also have these half circles here on this particular group, Blackwater group. You've got the semicircles on the top right, and then you've got the whole circle, and you see a little causeway going in. Always a little causeway for the name going in. Now you've got blood and breath as coordinated collaborators all over existence. So they must apply to all areas of existence. So it must apply to human beings too. It must exist in human beings too. So indwelling each person is a spirit of blood that you got from your mother and a spirit of breath that you got from your father. And then the name is the personality of this life, which coordinate. His job is to be aware of both of them and to coordinate them because they come with different agendas. And the name has to know what each of the agendas are and coordinate them so they're not pulling apart. So different nations have different places that these spirits live. For the Iroquois, spirit of blood lives in the marrow of the bones, and spirit of breath lives in your head. It's like that little voice in your head. Different nations have it differently. It might be in the swirls of the fingertips because it looks like a whirlwind. That's breath for some nations. For other nations, the kind of wind that comes out of your belly, not necessarily sweet smelling, is breath. Okay, I can go with that. You tend to find that down south. Blood might be the spleen for obvious reasons. So it just depends. Here's another very early drawing. I just like the drawing. Virginia, 1585. Okay, now some nations fractal out the halves of blood and breath. So you've got two spirits of blood and you got two spirits of breath. That does make a lot of sense if you're indigenous. In fact, some nations out in the west, northwest, have as many as 16. So it keeps fractaling. People were aware what they were doing. Native Americans used formal binary math. I've seen a few articles on this from mathematicians. To form a binary math, people were aware of what they were doing. So you've got two of breath, two of blood, and then you've got the one name. The name is still a singular entity whose job is to coordinate the agendas of breath and blood. You've also got pinions of the earth, who are the four mothers of earth, the four serpents that pin down the directions, and the four winds of breath that show where the directions are in the sky. So it's all over the place. It's an infinity of fractals. Now the missionaries got hysterical when they found out about the multiplicity of spirits. And so the only connection in their minds was to witchcraft and familiar spirits. Blood was the women's sphere, and in Europe, women were already the bad guys. So it was easy for the missionaries to decide that up was good. That's a European thing. Up is good. God's up there. So they decided that that was the good one, the breath, the male. And down was earth. That was bad. And that's what they tried to manipulate indigenous thought into being. It took with some people, not with others. So they made the breath spirit into God, blood spirit into devil, and used it for their own manipulative purposes, for which I have not forgiven. Anthropologists and historians followed suit and interpreted everything they saw this same way. Why? Because they were patriarchal Europeans with their monotheism. One God, one life, and all that good stuff. By the way, there's multiplicity of lives. Typically, everybody has 4. Some nations will have more, and depending on how powerful and needed your spirit is for the nation, for the people, you might come back more. Some are permanent incarnations like Mother Earth. She's permanent because we need her. Okay, now whenever you run into references to the multiplicity of spirits in Western lore, it's going to say, oh, the informants were confused. Not that they knew what they were talking about. They were confused. They didn't know their own traditions. Not true. We know them, and it's not what they were presenting. Okay, now what happens when your knowledge is actively forbidden? Indigenous spiritual systems were outlawed, first by the priests and missionaries, the heavy-handed attempt to force assimilation, starting with the inception of the US, but in 1882, absolutely outlawed. It was against federal law for indigenous holy people to transmit knowledge, against federal law. And they created the boarding school system, which was kid prison with extreme brutality. And by the way, cemeteries, what kind of a school has a cemetery for the children who were beaten or starved to death? Okay, what happens when your knowledge of your culture is treated this way? Well, some people are going to repress it. Some people are going to really genuinely forget it, especially when they don't say anything to their children. Their children genuinely won't know. And some are going to remember a little. Some are going to remember it all. Some are only going to remember a little. Now, there's the old British proverb that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Boy, is that true. And here's an illustration I got from Zutao. A little frog in the well thinks that all he can see at the bottom, from the bottom of the well, is all there is. That's based on an old Indian story, Hindu Indian India, about the frog and his little bit of knowledge. Same idea. Now, one of the things that's happened in modern Western culture is a few people know that indigenous culture was always open to non-hetero folks. We always had multiple spirits. Some people knew that. So what they do, presto chango, they mixed it all up and they developed a cultural meme, which was actually passed out to the entire American culture in season 5, episode 13 of a very popular series, Bones, where the all-knowing anthropologist says in a super bright way, Native Americans believed that homosexuals were of 2 spirits. And wow, this goes on. All throughout the culture, it was already being spread heavily. It's not true. That's not how it works. That's not what it is. That's not what tradition says. I looked into how this got spread so widely, how they morphed. The two spirits were quickly appropriated by LGBTQ communities that really didn't know much. Paul Gunnell certainly knew more and better, and Will Roscoe, interestingly, knows more and better. I asked Paula, some times ago, might have even been early 2000, if she knew where this misuse of the two spirits came from. And she said, well, I was at a meeting in California of a particular lesbian group trying to find a respectful way to refer to people in the community, because at that point it was dangerous to your life. And somebody in the group, Indigenous, vaguely remembered something about two spirits. So without further ado, they just decided they were two-spirited people. And I said, Paula, that did some damage. She said, I know, but you can't stop it once it starts. When I looked up Changing Ones by Will Roscoe, he had essentially the same story about that. I think it was like page 100, 101, something like that. So he knew too. Nevertheless, this designation continues, which is not just annoying, but it takes away the ability of Indigenous people to speak about their own cultures. It's more imperialism. That's what it is. So two-spiritedness today is among all the things we just know for sure that just aren't so, to borrow that Will Rogers line. He was Cherokee, by the way. Real tradition, everybody has at least two spirits. They are fractals of the twin cosmos, and they're unconnected with being gay or lesbian or trans or anything else. What LGBTQ is called boundary crossing. It's a totally different thing. And I thought I'd take some time to show you what boundary crossers are. I've got a couple examples. One is the serpent you see in the water here, and the other is the bear with her cub. Okay, now serpents, they do things, they cross what looks like natural boundaries that other critters can't cross. Wow, they must know something. We should listen to them. Serpents can live in water. They can live on the ground. They can live underground. They can live in the trees. Wow. How do they do that? What other creature can do that? Okay. Serpents always give warning before they attack. Other creatures don't do that. Wow. They have a sense of honor. In Indigenous cultures, serpents are honored. They're not hated or feared. Bears, very interesting critters. Really interesting critters. And that's always been true in Indigenous culture. Among other things, bears are the four-footed. They are like wolves, like cougars, like deer, like moose. They walk on 4 feet. But wait a minute. They can also stand on 2 feet and walk around on 2 feet like humans, like two-footed. Like birds, who are also two-footed. What's going on? They must know something. On top of that, bears live in a house. Mama makes a house. She has a house she lives in. And she raises her children in a house. Okay, people started using those ideas. Okay, we say that the bear showed us we should live in the houses, and the beaver showed us how to make a house that wasn't a cave. Whoa. They must know something. They must know more than the rest of us. Okay, bears showed us how to be a mommy. They take very good care of their little cubs, and they'll go hungry to feed their cubs. They'll show their cubs how to take care of themselves, and they keep the cubs with them until they can. They must know something. Bears, if you ever go into a new area and you don't know what plants you can eat safely, watch the bear. Whatever she can eat, you can eat, right? Because bears and human can digest the same thing. If you're not feeling well, watch what bear takes to feel better, because you can take the same medicinal plant. That's why bears are medicine. They showed us medicine. Wow. This is what boundary crossers do. They cross boundaries that look like you can't get over them, but these critters do. They must know more than the rest of us. We should listen to them, which is why gays, lesbians, which is pretty much what we had back when, are usually spirit people. They're usually holy people in the culture. That's not the same thing as having two spirits, which we all do. So it is a category and a special category, but it's not about two spirits. And I'm going to stop my share here. Kaarina, we can see you.
Thank you, Barbara. Are you complete, or is there
It's
more
complete.
you'd like? Okay. That was really a wonderful presentation. And Kaarina, I'm so happy that your video is now working.
Yes.
And it's very exciting to have both of you here in this conversation, because Kaarina is actually working back through her own culture, European, Northern culture, all the way back to the indigeneity there. And there are not a whole lot of questions, but I do have one for the both of you, which is, I know that you collaborate quite a bit. And Kaarina, I'm wondering, and Barbara, how has this collaboration helped or hindered your discussion around these bear stories, this idea of the cosmology? Kaarina, can you just say a little bit about your own experience, because you went back in your own way and then had these conversations with Barbara. What was the big aha for you there? Was there something that sort of broadened your idea, or?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I have been brought to reconsider my own culture because of what I've learned from Barbara and from other Native people. It all started with my experiences in the sweat lodge. They reminded me of my culture, but they were still much more spiritual and deeper than our much more commercialized and modern rituals. So I started really researching our own indigenous roots and everything I knew about the past, and found that we had a gift economy and we had very similar rituals, but they have been buried over by our own colonial history. We were colonized by the Russians and by the Swedes and Norwegians. So, it's, I have had a lot of opportunities now to reconsider, to ask new questions of my own culture on the basis of the information that I received from Native North America. Without that, I don't think I would have been able to imagine the different way. And the gift schema, which I refer to, is right there in the Native system, and we had it too. And I think that the further back we go in history with other cultures, or people have it, but it's the patriarchy that has taken it away from us.
Thank you for that. Barbara, do you have any comments that you'd like to add to that question and the conversation?
Oh yeah, I think talking to Kaarina made me start thinking about how ancient the bear knowledge really is. Before that, of course, I knew that bears were medicine and all the other stuff from tradition, but I hadn't really thought about how it goes back before the last ice age. I thought, she's right. She's right about that. It really does, because we have traditions that go back before the last ice age, in fact, back a couple ice ages. And the bear is there, and the bear is female connected. And I hadn't really thought about that before I was talking to Kaarina, but I had her come to UT and make a couple days worth of presentations to the university. And when I saw that, I was thinking about the Golden Women presentations and the other things she was doing. And we just started talking about the similarities, and I was very, very struck by that, which is how we got together to make a joint presentation to Oxford on the Bear Book. I just call it the Bear Book. By the way, the editor, Kaarina, says she hopes to have information for us next Friday. So kind of heard that before, but I hope it's true. So in any case, we have that proposal out, and I had not considered that Europeans had this. I mean, I knew about the Sami and I knew about the pre-Viking, because by the way, Kaarina, if you think about it, the Russians, the Swedes, and the Norwegians were all Vikings. And they weren't Christian until they ran face first into that other reading culture, the Europeans coming up, just the reinvention of the Roman culture, face first. And they were both so mean that neither could defeat the other, so they joined forces and called themselves Christians. And the real main contribution of the southern invaders to the northern was the idea of the singular God, the singular male God. Because if you look at the old Viking stuff, women had their own presentations and realities too, and their own power. So that was where you started seeing the patriarchy get really, really heavy. I think that's where things really started getting erased with that combination of forces. But in any case, I was very struck by the antiquity and the spread of what Kaarina was saying about the bear rituals. And yeah, they do go to Ireland. They do go across northern Russia. They are pretty darn old. So it seemed that we should do something about this. So we're doing something about this.
And we are so fortunate that you are doing it and you're doing it together. Jen, I'm wondering, do you have anything that you might want to offer around this topic, but particularly here's this issue about language. You know, Barbara and Kaarina's original ethnic language is quite different than English, which is the language that we share to speak about this with. And I'm wondering, the gift of that sharing, you know, it creates a whole different experience of quote unquote what Barbara and Kaarina are talking about in terms of relationship to cosmos and language.
Yeah, I really can't speak to that. Barbara and Kaarina have to talk about it, but I did want to ask what Kaarina talked about the gift schema and the bear, and what can you tell me more about that? What is the relation of the gift schema and the bear? Yeah.
Who is on?
You're unmuted, Kaarina, so go ahead and what you have to share about that.
It's too huge a topic. I have been looking just for alternatives to what we know about the bear rituals, the bear ceremonial and St. Bridget's festival. And the schema that you talk about, I'm not applying linguistic theory or economic theory, but more the whole worldview of the gift, remembering the ancestors and honoring the other. I think that's a key thing, is giving value to the other in the bear rituals and the bear schema. What is important is not using the bear as a resource or for one's own good, as you do in the exchange paradigm, but giving value to the bear. So for instance, in the bear ceremonials, the hunters in Finnish and many other research projects, they claim that the hunters express guilt for killing the bear, and that's why they organize the feast. So that is exchange for me, you know, that they don't, so to speak, fully honor the bear, but they want to prevent the bear from giving a revenge for the killing. And these kinds of notions run all across the study of bear ceremonial. And if you apply the gift schema, then you say, no, the hunters were honoring the bear, and the bear had its own intrinsic value and not use value. So that's how I understand the gift schema, but I'm sure that there's much more I could do with it, taking language into account, but maybe you're better at doing it. I know you're better at doing it, Jen. So just tell me what you would do with it.
Well, I don't know. I don't know enough about the bear. Maybe Barbara does. Barbara who can speak to that, of course.
Well, what I was thinking about is the idea of the women that marry the bear. She gives the bear consequence, and the bear gives her safety. And interestingly, it's the human man, usually led by one of the wife's brothers, that kills him. And he actually allows himself to be killed so she can get the kids out of there, because their kids are part bear, part human. I think this has a lot to do with the old ceremonies that were heavily forbidden of mind-altering substances like the black drink, that would bring you into another space where you would recognize other dimensions, like the scheme of the Portsmouth and Tenochtitlan, the multi-dimensional aspect. If you look at the old cave drawings from 20,000, 30,000 years ago, they show humans shifting into animals. And I know Bernie Moutien says, the anthropologists down South Africa have wrong. Those are not men running around in the cave art. They're women. I think probably she's right. And I think that the woman marrying the bear is woman initiative, and it's got to do with women's mind-altering rituals using the herbs, because herbs are women's sphere. And getting in touch with spirit knowledge of caves, which are wombs. I think that applies in the sauna as well. Caves are wombs. And what do you bring forth from the womb? The bear comes forth from the womb. The baby bear comes forth from the womb. This is a really strong set of connections for marrying the bear. And I'm still thinking about some of it, but I think that's probably pretty important. Kaarina, what do you think?
I don't know what to add to that, except that on a very, very basic level, of course, the marriage of the woman and the bear is an expression of women's longing for the erotic connection that is also spiritual, because in this split consciousness of the Western mind, the erotic and the spiritual are always separate. And so I think that the bear woman story on some very deep level connects eros and sexuality, which patriarchal religions don't do. And maybe that's my own interest in it, why I wanted to always marry a bear. I don't know. There's a lot of mystery in it. And I think that the gift schema is also about mystery, because it's an ongoing process, and it doesn't have the end result, end product that you purchase, so to speak. This is a bit philosophical and complex to say like this. I have to write it so I can keep track of my thinking, but I know there's something there. And the gift schema, I like it, Jen, because it's not just a theoretical abstraction, but it has spirituality about the very word. Somehow I feel that it's alive. It's something alive, right? Whereas the exchange is a dead construct. And it inspires me. So the gift schema gives me something all the time. But it's hard to say it, articulate it. And maybe we're not supposed to completely articulate it because it's part of the mystery. So I'm adding
I
a
think
dimension to what Genevieve is writing about, but I'm sure that it's there in your thinking.
I think the gift schema is very basic. It really is the underlying schema of all human interaction, human thinking, and knowledge and interaction with the world. And so since it's everywhere, we don't see it. But it is also has a number of different themes, many different themes that come out of it. So we need to learn to trace them all as part of the underlying gift schema. So we realize that what we are is giving and receiving beings, and not exchange-based beings.
Thank you, Barbara, Kaarina, and Jen, for that really thorough conversation. But it sounds like it's a growing conversation, and perhaps we'll see something in the future with the three of you contributing together, which would be fabulous. And with that, I wondered if there are some questions and comments that are coming in. We have Judith and Liliana who have been watching both the Q&A and the comments. So Liliana, did you have a question or comment that you'd like to share with the group, and you can direct it?
Yeah, there is a question from Vajra to Barbara about crossing boundaries. It's kind of a long question, so maybe Barbara, you can read it also. Barbara, you presented LGBTQ as knowing something about crossing boundaries. I see this in LGB and in any cross-sex living, for lack of a better term, in matriarchal and indigenous cultures. But the way TQ is playing out in today's rape culture is fraught with aggression, misogyny, violence, and hostility. Case in point, males who identify as women are being put into women's prisons, and women are being raped by some of them, and one woman is already pregnant. Also, women-only spaces are being mandated by law that they must allow in men who identify as women. This kind of transgression and aggression did not happen in matriarchal and indigenous cultures. Will you please address this TQ issue? Because I do not find TQ playing out as a model for crossing boundaries. Thank you. This is from Vajra Ma.
Okay, define CQ and PQ for me, please.
The TQ is transgender queer.
CQ?
TQ, T.
Yeah, but so that's the only one you said. I didn't read it. No, it didn't happen in matriarchal cultures because, you know, transgender wasn't a thing unless a man had had an accident, and then it wasn't really transgender. New issues arise as new science and new abilities to tinker with things arise. So for example, somebody gets cataracts, you can fix it with surgery and lenses these days. That's a new circumstance to figure into things. This is a new circumstance to figure in. By and large, matriarchies do not judge people on the basis of their sexual expression, unless that sexual expression is identifiably injuring somebody. Like if you're beating up on somebody, you're going to be stopped. Other than that, as long as you've got people who agree to exchange expressions of affection in that way, nobody's going to get in their way. That tends to be how matriarchies run things, a non-judgmental sort of a thing. Or so it's called. It is judgmental. If you hurt somebody, I'm going to stop you. I judged that and found you wrong. That's all there is to it, and I'm not going to apologize for it. As for putting transgender women in male prisons and rape and all that, those are expressions of patriarchy trying to maintain its control of everybody's reality. So the problem there is to get rid of the patriarchy, not to put pressure on people who are trans, okay, as far as I can tell. So the real problem that's being described is patriarchy on steroids, which is what the prison system is. We need to revise the prison system. We need to revise the laws. We need to think about more carefully what's being called right, what's being called wrong, and how it is rewarded or punished in Western culture. And that's beyond me personally to organize. I wish I could. I have a trans grandson, so I wish I could do this, but I can't. We all are forced to live in this mess. So I think it's going to have to be joint efforts to identify the roots of problems. The most extreme expressions of patriarchy happen in controlled places like school, like prison. Okay, and if you can think of other highly controlled situations like hospitals, that I think may be changing more than some of the others. But the more controlled the situation, the more likely you are to have patriarchal expression involved in the mix in a serious way. So what I would suggest is starting with the most patriarchal places you can find, like churches, like prisons, and starting pushback. And I don't mean dialogue. People whose minds are set are not going to engage in dialogue. I'm talking actual pushback, like grandma saying, we're not going to allow women to enter the circle to the right because that's just plain untraditional. That's just plain a violation of spiritual belief. Here, the spirits will be confused. So we went in, left. We usurped what they were going to do and went in, left. Sometimes you just have to do that kind of thing and then take the consequences, which is less screaming and hollering at you.
Thank you, Barbara. Kaarina, did you have anything that you wanted to offer to this particular topic?
It's a very difficult topic because, while I'm totally for the trans rights, there's in Finland now a strange atmosphere of not allowing women to be women. Somehow in daycare centers also, there's a suggestion that we don't talk about boys and girls, and this focus on the neutral is very problematic because whatever is neutral becomes is a way of reinforcing the masculated identity. But when you also at the same time have this trend to get rid of the word woman and woman's history and women's biological processes, then there's no space for addressing the concept of woman. And this reminds me of Claudia von Wehrhoff's writings, where she talks about alchemical patriarchy, wishing to create a second culture without mothers and without women. And I chose this topic because I think it's a current issue that somehow we have to deal with. What is left of this planet and Mother Earth and everything if the neutral takes over? And even in the radical circles in the gender studies, woman is kicked out. So that's all I can add to this. But I agree totally with the analysis that it has to do with patriarchy, and the trans movement obviously is also very much impacted by patriarchy. So if you could somehow introduce the matriarchal values there, maybe that would change and allow for the kind of respect that we are hoping for.
Thank you, Kaarina.
Now there's a tradition, strong tradition in the eastern woodlands is east of the Mississippi, especially in the area where I am, that in the as the epics are about to change, and Iroquois have 4 epics, I think the Hopi have 5 or 6, it depends on the nation. But when the epic is about to change, as it did when the Constitution was given in the 12th century to the Iroquois, as it did with Sakanyadayo's Kailo in 1799, epics change. And there are great upheavals at that time, right? The tradition says that when the European invader has got the whole land and everything in the land, and has cut down all the trees and has destroyed the land, the turtle that carries us on her back is going to be very disturbed, and she's going to start rocking her carapace. That's the Atlantic coast and the Pacific coast. She's going to shiver and roll. And she's then, after a lot of upheaval, she's going to do a 360 in the water, as she did once before, and brush all the irritants off her back. And then life's going to start again. Okay, a lot of people say that we have entered that period. One of the key signs given by Sakanyadayo in his prophecies, he said in the year 2010, the ocean will turn black. And I was very struck by the oil disaster in the Gulf in the year 2010, the BP oil disaster. The ocean turned black. It did. Others say when the trees die from the top down. And we just took a drive east, my husband and I saw a lot of trees that were dying from the top down. So there are parts of the tradition that are really getting a little scary. And I wouldn't be surprised if disease wasn't part of the process, and we're looking at COVID and Delta and Lambda and all these other variants. I wouldn't be surprised. I happen to think there might be something to this. So I think maybe Mother Earth is going to resolve the problem herself.
Wow, that's telling. Thanks, Barbara, for that. The Earth herself. I think we're pretty complete with that question for now. It's a deep question that I think is an ongoing conversation. I don't think we're going to resolve it here. Jen, you were reaching in. Did you have something that you wanted to offer?
Me?
Jen, yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I believe that the gift economy, which is the mothering economy, and the exchange economy, which is a neutral economy, are part of this issue of trans versus female, or appropriating female or not. And I would like to be able to look at it as economic, and the conflict or the social attempt to deal with the two economies in terms of gender rather than in terms of economics. That is, they're driven, the gender conflict is driven by the economic paradigm conflict. That's what I'd like to say in a maybe too complicated way.
I think maybe, yes, in a soundbite, it's very complex to try to get the idea across. And that's why there's a hope that the three of you perhaps might be able to come up with a bare gift idea that you can share at a later date that's much more articulated, and you have breath and blood to be able to work through the dynamics. I'm checking to see if Judith, that you might have a question. I see that we've had plenty of questions and comments come up now.
There's been a lot of discussion in the chat about what Kaarina meant when she said trans men. So I'm going to put that in the form of a question, but with a comment first. Many years ago, I went to a ceremony in South America where the men dressed up as women, but they were doing it not because they identified as women, but specifically because they didn't, and they were making fun of women. They were doing it for the purpose of mocking women, and the things that the men did were hysterically funny. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of in the spirit of not appropriating language, which we've been talking a lot about today, and of using language precisely because words matter, is it a question of men who identify as women, or men who address as women on a regular basis, or men who dress as women only for this particular festival? And what is the appropriate word to use for that? And if some of the other attendees so if Kaarina could explain exactly what the purpose is, and maybe some of the other attendees would have suggestions on what is the appropriate word for that action.
Okay, yes, it's a very important point. And I think that the point that I was making when analyzing the rituals was that the men, probably cisgender men, were dressing up as women in order to mock mothers and to mock women's traditions and so on. So I have no way of knowing if they were trans women, or I don't know what they were. I can only comment on the clothing and the ethos of the drama. And also in my book, I will be more precise in when I'm contrasting the different rituals in different parts of Europe, if I can find out what is at stake, but it's not always clear, because what I only so far have been able to analyze is the pictures. And the pictures, of course, don't let you know if we're dealing with cisgender or actual men in drag, or it's burlesque. So it's complicated. It's not clear. But my point is anyway that there are no women involved as actors. The men play all the parts, just like in ancient dramas, and they appropriate the roles of the women. That was my point, but I will check it.
Thanks,
Can I ask for
Kaarina.
a clarification, Letitia, on that question?
Yes, of course.
Was that event that this person saw, did you say it was indigenous in South America?
No.
Yes, it was indigenous. It was an indigenous South America event.
Okay, there's something called backwards medicine. And in backwards medicine, you do everything in a backwards way. It's a kind of powerful medicine. You got to be careful with it, but life will be death, death will be life. Things will be their opposite. And you've got to carry on as though you're the other thing if you're going to do this correctly. That could have been a backwards medicine ritual. Also, males, speakers for the women. Women speak to women, men speak to men. So if the women have a message for the men, men dress up as women and deliver the message. Okay.
But should it not be reciprocal, because the women were not dressing up and acting as men?
Well, and they might not have been speakers to the men. It's a particular office. Nobody can just stand up and say, I'm a professor. You got to have that appointment. You get that appointment through particular political and social channels. By and large, the clan mothers control appointments to office in matriarchal situations. So I was thinking of, for example, Joseph Lafitau, one of the missionaries in 1724, writing about, oh, there are hermaphrodites, oh, there are men who dress like women, oh, terrible morality. In fact, those were the women's speakers to the men. The men speakers, the women, will be women dressed as men. So it's a particular office and only particular people are appointed to that office. I don't know if it was backwards medicine. I don't know if it was a speakership. I don't know if it was ridicule. It could have been any of those things unless I know the culture and the ceremony. You really can't comment. It might have been underinterpreted by somebody who didn't know the culture either.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be very careful about slapping Western expectations and explanations on things that are not Western.
Thanks. I think that's a really important point.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. I was going to bring that up. Oftentimes, there isn't an equivalency that doesn't actually translate from one culture to the next. Barbara's whole presentation about the twin cosmos is a really good example. There isn't an equivalency except through a lot of words and explanation of what their cosmology looks like. It's not an equivalent. It's not like you can do binary to something that has fractals. It's not the same thing. And we have a tendency, I think, to colonize yet again, to simplify, thinking that it is useful to the reader or useful to the listener to try to reduce it down, but it does more harm to the culture oftentimes. Liliana, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. From Mary Claire, this is what she is stating. Very illuminating presentations. Many thanks. Given your views on how much we may learn from the serpents and bears as boundary crossers, and how the idea of one God, one right idea, either or, right or wrong, represent patriarchal conditioning and the spread of the illusion of separation, consciousness, and thereby fear and violence, how might we peer together into these insights to melt the hurtful debate around acceptance of gender fluidity to dialogue collaboratively in inquiry of how the human species might still transcend myopic thinking toward the betterment of care for the fractal nature and two spirits of the cosmos? I hope I read it right.
Barbara, I'm guessing that the question is directed to you personally. So when you're ready.
Well, the split consciousness is actually Kaarina, but I think it was probably both of us.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think patriarchy has done terrible harm, and the mythology of patriarchy, which is monotheism, both Judaism, at least is now expressed. It actually was a lot more parallel when it started, but Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, it's a real sausage fest over there. Women are not allowed. They might as well hang a no girls allowed sign over their little clubhouse. It's done a lot of harm to everybody's understanding, especially in things that are taken for granted. For example, there's only one God. People only have one soul. People only live one life. Well, it depends on who you talk to. And there's no reason to start with base assumptions. And I guess that can be taken two ways, although I didn't intend a pun. There's no reason for our basic assumptions to come directly out of Western patriarchal Christian culture. The first thing we can do is stop doing that. And as America gets more and more diverse, I can see a lot of pushback coming from patriarchal Christian males. That's actually what all of hoopla is about right now. They see they're losing cultural power and they're trying to keep it violently, because that's the answer of Christian patriarchy is violence. I think the best thing to do is to keep on doing what we're already doing and allowing in as many immigrants as possible from as many places as possible, because that will force the conversation. That'll force the multiplicity. because no one group is going to be able to dominate the rest as they have here. So I think we're seeing the death of that one culture here, and you'll see how violent it's getting. The rest of the world, I can barely get through the day where I live in Ohio, so I'm not responsible for the rest of the world. Kaarina, you were in there too with your split consciousness.
Well, I don't know what to add, except that this is a schizoid world that we are living in, and we have been separated from each other also due to the dualisms of patriarchy, like, spirit versus matter, reason versus emotion. We all know those binaries that are the problem, and which are also part of the birth of eco-crisis and the exclusionary politics and the economics that treat nature as a resource and allow for the kinds of problems to arise that we are now facing. But to be honest, I didn't understand the question. I didn't understand what was the key point, so I can't address that.
Thanks, Kaarina. I don't know if there's a clarification, Liliana, that you have for that question, or you, Barbara, that you have for that question for Kaarina, or maybe here's what I want you all to know who are listening either live or in the recording. You can always contact our speakers. Their contact information is up at the website, and our speakers will be getting a copy of the comments and the questions that they're not able to answer. If we can't get to all your questions and more in depth, then they'll also have a list of the attendees' email addresses they can respond to. So with that, maybe we can go on to another question. That Judith?
This question is from Joan Marler. In terms of the ancient motif of hunting and killing of the bear, is there any indication realistically and or mythically that the bear being sacrificed is always a male, or are female bears also killed? Is there evidence of a taboo against killing female bears in Paleolithic and or later times?
Thank you. That's a tough question. I wish I had the answer to that. Harald Harman has addressed some of these questions, and he claims that the bear ceremonial was mostly focused on the male forefather, because the hunted bear was masculine of the male gender. But I don't know from him or any other scholars whether there was an actual taboo on female bears. I think if the bear was known to be carrying children or having cubs, then the taboo would be against killing the bear. I haven't found anything in the literature on that topic, but even today, there is a strong ethos of not killing the mother of the cubs that need it. Here in Finland, there's actually a guy who takes over the cubs who have become orphaned for various reasons, and he raises them as his children. And you can watch the movies, the DVDs done about this. It's very interesting. But yeah, I can answer that question about the Paleolithic attitude. That would be hard to reconstruct. And I hope, Joan, that you can let me know if you find the answer to this question.
How about you, Barbara? You have something to offer
Oh,
here?
women and children were always off limits. There are very strict rules about who was, am I unmuted? Yeah. There are very strict rules about who could be killed in warfare, and hunting was a form of warfare. Women and children were always among the, quote, innocents. That's an actual legal category. The innocents are people who are not part of the war or the strife. You cannot kill them. And females and cubs would certainly be in that category. And we also took in any little cubs that were motherless. Usually that was because mom fell in the water and drowned while she was trying to show them how to hunt or something like that. If a hunter ever killed a female, especially with cubs, he was persona non grata. He had to spend a lot of time in the sweat lodge getting rid of all that. In fact, anybody that killed anything in the hunt or in war had to spend a lot of time in the sweat lodge before they were considered able to walk among normal people in town again. They were not to bring that spirit into town, which I thought about a lot. You know, in World War II, after the men came marching home and all the celebrations, the incidence of domestic violence skyrocketed because they didn't sweat when they came home. They just came home with all that violence intact in them. I think that's a really important question that doesn't get explored. So, yeah, I would say that there was probably, whether it applied in Paleolithic times, I don't know. We've got some traditions that there was culture before the Ice Age that changed the culture. There was no hunting and no eating of animals before that. And it was only desperation that led the people to kill and eat animals when the ice and the snow came. So I think there might have been a general prohibition on any killing before that, but that's my surmise based on the traditions I know of the before time, before the ice, before the moving white stone mountains, the glaciers.
I would add that considering how in the Paleolithic, the Great Mother was worshipped around the same time as the bear, probably they would not have killed the she-bear. It would make sense. Of course, none of us can know that because there's no written records, but the same way that we infer things on the basis of the mentifacts and artifacts and the whole worldview, I would say that probably they respected life, particularly of the female gender.
Thank you, Barbara and Kaarina. Judith, I'm wondering, oh, Jen, did you have something that you wanted to share here?
Just that bears live in caves and people were living in caves at the same time. And so both of them were, I think Barbara was mentioning this, were coming from the womb. And the womb is also the gifting place, where the mother gives her gifts in her belly. So there's that connection between bears and women, people.
Thanks, Jen. So I think we're kind of complete with that question. Judith, do you have another one for us?
I know that the two of you are working together on a book, and I wonder if you can talk about the gifts to one another as you collaborate.
You are good at asking really difficult questions. I don't know. We are getting gifts all the time, and I mean, sharing knowledge, sharing information, just as we are doing right now with everyone. It's the gift schema, and I have to revise a lot of my thinking when I read Barbara, and it's a constant challenge to my Western trained mind. And I enjoy learning and growing as I have to reconsider what I've been taking for granted. But I'm also, of course, picking up new information. And one thing is important. I can read Russian, not perfectly, but still I studied Russian, and that is giving me access to a lot of information that is missing in North America. And I think that it will be very useful to the study of the goddess movement and of bear woman spirituality, because already in the 1960s there were men in Russia who who were writing about matriarchy and the Great Mother, but they were dismissed as communists. And even today, some scholars claim that we can't take that information seriously because they were working from a Marxist perspective. So maybe I can give something as a gift from that side, since Barbara doesn't probably read Russian, or maybe you do. But, and of course, there's Google. Everybody can translate with Google.
No, my husband knows a little Russian, so sometimes I pester him about it. But no, I don't know Russian. Our Slavic languages generally can't make it out. But yeah, you have the same effect on some of what I'm saying. I hear what you're saying on some things, and I see what you're saying, and I go, oh, I need to think about that a little more. Maybe I need to change this or that. So I think it's just, you do it for one another.
Yes, I think the language itself, the culture is embedded in the language, and they don't necessarily always translate. We try to find ways of describing things, oftentimes, especially in the spiritual point of view, or oftentimes in relational point of view. Maybe sometimes the poetry, the epic poetry, has a better way of describing it than actually the left brain linear equivalencies. And to note, I'm grateful that both Barbara and Kaarina are doing their work oftentimes inside the academic realms, and it's cracking open thinking, which is very critical and important, although oftentimes painful, which also gratitude to both of you and to Jen. And I wanted to also just give a shout out to Mary Condren, who is here, who she was referenced in often in Kaarina's talk, that Mary also has been doing deep work and collaboration in this notion of reclaiming these ideas all the way back to and through our female woman lines, through our own ancestral thoughts, and to not be messy with trying to make things look simple. They're not always that simple. I'm doing a time check because we have about 5 minutes left that I'd like to see if we can do some last closing words with Barbara and Kaarina and Genevieve before we actually close out our session. So is there something that else you would like to offer, Barbara, with the twin cosmos that you'd like to leave us with? It may be just the shout out that watch for our book, because
Our book isn't necessarily on twin cosmos, although I'm sure it'll come up. I think the most important thing I can emphasize is that people should not immediately transpose their cultural expectations on what they're seeing or hearing. I see that happen so much, especially in LGBTQ or Black Lives Matter, or a whole lot of issue-oriented pushes that have a community of their own. Very quickly transpose ideas as though everybody in the world was born knowing about them, and they weren't, or that everybody in the world is referring to them in the same way, and they aren't. And then getting angry when somebody doesn't do it exactly the way they expected. That does not advance discussion. That actually shuts down discussion, which is the last thing that I think we want to do. So that would be my endpoint.
Can I go next?
Yes, of course, please.
I wanted to add some hope also in terms of the impact that we can have. Here in Oulu, in this northern city, the engineering students take over always the May 1st spring rituals and festivals. They invade the city center and they try to sell a pornographic journal to get funding for their engineering field trips. And this magazine that they put out is all about mocking women and ethnic groups. And they justify it on the basis of the carnival era, the fact that in the carnivals you reverse everything, but they are not reversing everything. They are not reversing anything. And this is what I was worried about with these many carnivals and festivals, that women are not anywhere in a reversal position, but men are simply doing excess masculinity rituals. And so I don't understand what they have to do with the traditions of carnivals. But anyway, I raised the stink when I was a professor here in women's studies. And it became a real big issue. And the rector of the university had to make a statement about how acceptable it was to get money for the engineering students by selling pornography. And he said that it was okay for 1 day a year. And that made the women outraged. And I became, of course, the target of the anger of these engineering students. And the next year, they made me the centerpiece of their magazine. They had mockery pictures of me as an ugly, fat feminist who doesn't have a sense of humor, and who wants to take the money away from the engineering students. But it didn't matter because it changed everything. Since then, they have not dared to put out this kind of horrible material. They still have the pornography in it, but they are more careful about at least making fun of and whatever. They use those terms, because they said that for 1 day a year they can do that in the name of carnival. So my point is that we should really be on the watch out also for rituals, because the rituals are such a strong element in patriarchy. And once I started this movement, a lot of women joined me. This was like about 10 years ago, in changing what we do at the spring ritual period. They also threw women into the water, into cold water. It was a ritual to get them, initiated. But I noticed that much of the ritual tradition was against women and violence against women. And the women just took it as a humor. They didn't understand that there was anything wrong with it until, we raised hell. So it's worth raising hell. That's my point. I conclude with that. Raise hell.
Thank you, Kaarina. Thank you. Jen, what would you like? You have some closing words for us that you'd like to offer before I end our session.
I'd just like to thank Barbara and Kaarina for continuing to give their gifts over so many years and through so much struggle, satisfying our need to know in the way that you do. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you for being on our show, and back soon.
Thank you, Jen. Just a last comment from Joan Marler, that she is thanking Barbara and Kaarina for their ongoing collaboration, because your example of inquiry and understanding from each of your point of views, speaking, dialoguing, and expanding your vision, both outward and inward, is really very, very important across boundaries, so that we can extend our understanding of one another. I would like to thank both of you personally, and for our staff, our volunteers, for you joining us today, Kaarina and Barbara. It was very, very enlightening, as you might be able to see from the comments. And if you didn't have a chance, we will definitely make sure you get them so you can read them at your leisure. Liliana and Judith, thank you so much for providing questions and for watching the chat and the Q&A, and our tech support, Diane. Thank you so much. Jen, always thank you for your ongoing gifts of the gift economy and the maternal gift economy specifically, and the women in the International Feminists for the Gift Economy Network. We thank you for the extension and the deepening and broadening of everyone's understanding of what the maternal gift economy is about. My name is Letitia Layson. We're going to be posting this video on the website. In 2 weeks, we're going to be having our Salon number 19. We're very excited to have Starhawk, who will be presenting the gift of permaculture, and she'll be bringing along another woman with her. So I'm thrilled to hear more about what she's up to and the gifts that she has to offer to us. If you want to be notified of our upcoming salons and events, you can sign up at our website, the Maternal Gift Economy Movement.org, and join our mailing list. We welcome your questions and comments. You can send them to us at maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. And if you have a question for our speakers or for Jen, you can send them to this email address, maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. We'll make sure that it gets to them. And the date of our salon in 2 weeks is August the 28th. So until then, enjoy the gifts and bounty of the season. Be well, stay safe in this COVID time with this new Delta variant. Be kind to one another, and really have a great rest of your weekend. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Leticia.